Hey, you're listening to episode 160 of the Keto Diet Podcast, and today we're chatting about the pieces of ourselves we don't want people to see, the fear of vulnerability, instant comfort behaviors, and why that could be a good versus not so awesome thing, and the whole concept of when I XYZ, meaning when I lose weight, when I sell my house, when I move, blah, 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 when I buy a new pair of jeans, I will be happy. I am so thrilled to have Brooklyn on the show today. I'm going to introduce her in a second. Her and I feel like we go way back, more like energetically. Like she found my work on Healthful Pursuit years ago, wrote down my stuff on a sticky note, totally forgot about it for years. Then I was on Instagram about a year ago. I watched a video of hers and I was like, who is this woman? I reached out to her and I was like, I think you're amazing. Can you come on the show? We recorded this episode like forever ago, and then she moved and her business was changing and adapting. She's actually living in Canmore, Alberta, which is where I'm from, and I love that area, and I'm so jealous of all the pictures she's been sharing of just like the amazing hikes that she's going on. She's one of those people that you just want to be around all the time, and her energy is just like on point if you believe in that sort of stuff, and it's just, I want to hear from her. I want to receive messages from her. I love listening to her storytelling and just everything. So I hope you guys enjoy today's episode. Now, we do talk about drug addiction and eating disorders. So if you are triggered by conversations about these things, maybe skip today's episode. Now, if you have questions about today's content, or maybe you get stuck on something, or it triggers something in you and you're like, I want to ask Leanne this thing, go to healthfulpursuit.com/contact. You can submit your question and I will answer it on an upcoming show. Now you can catch up on previous podcast episodes and notes from today's show by going to ketodietpodcast.com and then just look for episode 160 on that page. So I got two cool things for you today, and that is that I've been doing a virtual book reading tour on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. I've been posting videos. If you guys haven't caught up on all the videos, I mean, there's so much free content. You can go to ketodietpodcast.com, look for the show notes for episode 160 and check up on all those videos. I've listed the link there. You can watch the videos. I read from the book. We talk about PMS and menopause and PCOS and how to use keto to support your hormones, like all the things. Also, we have like 9 days until Keto for Women launches. This is my upcoming paperback coming out June 18th. If you've pre-ordered a copy, awesome. If you haven't, head on over to ketoforwomen.com to lock in the lowest price. You don't pay until June 18th and you're guaranteed a copy when it comes out. Okay. So our guest today is Brooklyn Vienneau. I hope I said her last name correctly. She's a life empowerment coach, spiritual guide, inspirational speaker, and co-founder of Holistic Chicks, an organization that facilitates holistic healing and transformation for individuals who are ready to transcend their darkness and reclaim their personal power and freedom. With elaborate experience in childhood trauma, addiction, and body image, her life's mission is to influence her community and the world to defy society's constructs and return home to authenticity, vulnerability, and truth. I think this might be my favorite episode of the podcast. I hope you guys really, really enjoy it. And if you listen and you love it, let me know what you think. I'd love to have Brooklyn back on. Okay, let's do this thing. Welcome to the Keto Diet Podcast, the show all about keto for women so you can burn fat, balance your hormones, and heal your body. If you're new around these parts, I'm Leanne Vogel. You may know me as the international best-selling author of the Keto Diet and author of the upcoming paperback book, Keto for Women, where I'm showing you how to take charge of the imbalances that are ruling your life so you can discover your happy weight in 3 easy steps. Or you may know me as the nutritionist that likes dipping pork rinds in avocado oil mayo. I'm so glad you're here with me today, and thanks so much for listening. Hey, Brooklyn, how's it going?
So good. How are you, Leanne?
I'm so good. Thanks for coming on the show. This is so great to finally have you here.
I am so honored that you stumbled across my Instagram page and decided to invite me. I feel like I'm meeting Oprah for the first time. It's such a blessing. I truly have been following you for so many years, and it's been amazing to watch your journey unfold and watch you progress. And for you to reach out to me is just like such an honor. I feel so humbled today.
Well, it's so cool. The Instagram world is really neat because I guess you had been following me and I didn't know about you until I was just searching on Instagram for stuff and your story was like featured and I watched it and I'm like, who is this person?
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh, you bare your soul in your posts. Like you could just see right through your eyes into your soul and like back at me. And it was just like, oh my God, the content you share is just so amazing that I knew I just needed to share it with all of the people that listen to the podcast.
Wow, that is just so beautiful. Thank you so much.
Of course, totally.
Grateful for you.
Oh, amazing. So I wanted to ask you the very first question that I wanted to kind of set the stage is, what does it mean to be truly seen? Like, what does that mean to you to be truly seen?
Yeah, we're just diving right deep, right off the bat. You know what? It's about vulnerability. Being seen is about bearing your soul, as you said, to the world and exposing your truth with the expectation that you might be judged, you might be rejected, you might be shunned. And I think that we live in a world where we are conditioned to wear masks. So these masks keep us protected from the judgment, from the hate, from the negativity that is constantly penetrating our fields, right? So I think that allowing yourself to truly be seen and be unfiltered and raw and naked and exposed allows you to show an authentic side of yourself that perhaps society might not condone or might not advocate for, might not encourage, because it's a perpetual cycle that society wants us to stay asleep. Society wants us to stay small, and society wants us to hide the pieces of ourselves which are deemed bold or inappropriate or unacceptable or too much, right? So for me, I think really understanding the notion of the difference between our ego and our soul. So our ego operates on safety, right? Our ego likes to play safe. It likes to be protected. And so being vulnerable makes you susceptible to compromising that safety. And so to protect ourselves from the emotional harm of society, we end up wearing these masks, or we put these walls up to keep ourselves protected, right? And it's a fear-based process that it allows us to hide who we are, who we really are, in order to comply to the expectations of society. So to be seen means to show up authentically, to show up exactly as you are, to own your anger, to own your fear, to own your perceived flaws, the things that make you different, right? The messiness and the chaos of your life. And to see all of those imperfections as gifts and to share them with the world, because it is your birthright to show up exactly as you are. And so I think that that's what being seen means to me. And I think that in order to start to cultivate that in your life, you need to start to view yourself from a place of love, view yourself from a place of compassion, do that inner work and ask yourself why you're judging yourself, what you're judging yourself for, what those belief systems are rooted in, and then start to see others through a lens of love as well. Because this world is so founded in judgment, right? The world that we live in right now. And we really want to start to break that down. And it begins with each individual person doing their own inner work, looking at themselves through a lens of love, and then sharing that with the world and just being kind and compassionate to everybody else, knowing that we're all doing the best that we can. We all have our individual stories, right? We all have our own uniqueness and our quirks and the things that make us who we are, and to celebrate that together. I think that that's such an important aspect of being vulnerable. And that's what will allow us to see each other as you saw me, right? As you saw the truth of my soul. I think that will start to ripple in the world as we start to cultivate that on a regular basis with people.
So beautifully said. Oh my gosh. Yes to all of that. And do you feel like my husband and I were having this conversation the other day just about chaos and how a lot of people perceive, like, people will meet me and be like, oh my gosh, you have so much, like, you do so much, you have it all together. And I don't. Like, I have at least once a month, I have complete breakdowns where I'm like, what am I doing? Who am I? What's happening? And I'm crying and there's so much chaos. Do you feel like social media plays a role in this anti-chaos life where we all think everyone has their stuff together when in actuality, like nobody knows what they're doing?
Oh my God, absolutely. I mean, social media is such a beautiful tool and can be leveraged in so many positive ways. But if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know how to properly tackle that beast that exists on the online space, you will likely be left feeling inadequate, feeling not good enough, feeling like you need to create a false truth or a false story to show everybody else that you are okay, because that's perpetually what is being shared on social media, right? So I think that there is a movement that's happening right now where people are starting to communicate more vulnerably and start to share some deeper truths and talk about their shadows and their darkness and really start to like lift that veil of mistruth or that veil of illusion to be able to show people like, yeah, I've gone through trauma. Yeah, I've been addicted to substances. Yeah, I have a fucked up life, right? And to totally own that and honor it and really be okay with that. And I think that for me, being able to share that aspect of myself in the social space has allowed me to come even closer to my own authenticity, because I see that, you know, out of the one or two people that may cyberbully me or attack me or shun me for the words that I use or the way that I express myself, there are hundreds or thousands of people who love and accept me exactly as I am. And so that's just really telling. And I want to be able to take that stance and to show everybody else that if they can show up authentically as themselves, whether it be in the social sphere or just in real life, that you can really start to just be okay with the chaos, be okay with the messy, be okay with the trauma, right?
Totally. Back to today's episode in a sec. ButcherBox features 100% grass-fed and finished heritage-bred pork and organic free-range chicken. ButcherBox sends you high-quality, health-promoting meats directly to your door on dry ice and free shipping anywhere in the lower 48. ButcherBox makes committing to quality protein sources less expensive and more available to everyone. Their prices are hard to beat, and it's challenging to find a higher quality product anywhere in the USA. I've been using ButcherBox for years and love the convenience of a package showing up just when I need it, and their ground sausage is an absolute dream. ButcherBox has put together a super special deal for all listeners of the show. Order your first box and get a special gift plus an additional $20 off. Now, this special gift is so epic that I can't even mention it on the episode today. So you'll have to go to butcherbox.com/keto diet to check out the deal plus get your $20 off your very first order. Again, that's butcherbox.com/keto diet to check out the deal plus get $20 off your first order. If you're unsure of the link, simply check out today's show notes for all the details. Okay, back to today's episode. And that vulnerability, I remember like probably 5 years ago, that word terrified me. I didn't want anything to do with it. How did you step into your own vulnerability and what's your story and how you got to the work that you're doing now?
My story. Oh, girlfriend. You know what? I'm 26 years old and I have lived a really wild life and there have been a lot of traumatic moments. So I grew up, just a really condensed version here. I grew up as a competitive ice dancer. So I was always being judged. I was always being watched. And there were people who were constantly criticizing me for the way that I looked, the way that I presented myself. So I felt like I needed to be this well put together person. I grew up in a small town. And so I was Brooklyn Vienneau, like I was the star figure skater. And I carried that label. And so that guided me and took me into my teenage years. And so I had a back injury when I was 14, 15 years old, and I had to quit skating against my will. And it was a really challenging time for me. My relationship with my parents and my family life was very toxic and traumatic at that time. And skating was my escape. It was my coping mechanism. It was all of my identity. So when that was stripped from me, I felt like I had absolutely nothing. So what do we do when we feel like we have nothing else to turn to? We like to escape, and we like to escape and numb, right? And the only way that I knew how to do that was through food. and through alcohol. So I started drinking at a really young age. I became an alcoholic actually very quickly. I developed a binge eating disorder. And so those two coping mechanisms were something that completely dictated my entire life and made me feel so disconnected from who I was. And I thought that ambitious, young, talented, gifted skater who was once going to go to the Olympics and make it big and be a star became completely like broken and so damaged in this place of like nothingness. So that behavior, those coping mechanisms brought me through my teenage years. And then I went to university thinking that all of that would go away. And of course, I just brought it with me, right? Because if we don't actually get to the root, we carry it forever. And then something really traumatic happened when I was in my second year of university. My father, who, by the way, just a trigger warning for anybody who's listening right now, my father, who I did not have a relationship with at that time, was trying to reach out to me over text. He was begging me to call him, and I was saying no because I had that wall up and I didn't know what was going on. I had no idea why he was trying to reach out to me. And so the next day I received a phone call, and this phone call changed my life forever. So my mom had called me, and my parents were separated. My mom had called me and told me that my dad had experienced a psychotic break, and he tried to murder his girlfriend, and he also tried to kill himself. So thankfully, the woman was safe and she was okay, and I'm so grateful for that. And he actually almost died. His heart stopped for 21 minutes. He was in an induced coma. And so that is a whole other podcast within itself, that story. But you can imagine the trauma that my family experienced as a result of all of this, right? So the things that I learned from that experience have completely altered the way that I look at my life. So that happened 7 years ago. I was 18 years old. I was very vulnerable at that time, and I was headed down a path of destruction. I was suicidal. I was ready to end my life, truly. And so this opportunity, this experience gave me a chance to either sink or swim. So I was not spiritual at the time. I really didn't know what to believe in, but I felt like there was something, some higher power that was guiding me to make the choice to move forward in a different direction. So this was the life-altering experience that shifted me into the state of post-traumatic growth. So from there, that is when I really started diving into nutrition. I started getting back to the gym. I started reclaiming my strength and starting to feel empowered again. Mind you, there were so many mental blocks that I was still working through and just dealing with that post-traumatic stress and everything that was going on with that. But it brought me to this place of discovering health and kind of redefining that in my own unique way. So after a couple of years of losing an extreme amount of weight, feeling super strong, feeling really beautiful, I decided I'm going to do a bodybuilding competition, because why not? This would just be the pinnacle of everything, my redemption, right? My breakthrough, where I could show everybody I still have a nice body. I still have it all, right? I'm still this fierce little competitor that I know lies within me. So I trained for this bodybuilding competition, and I was so disciplined. I knew when I stepped on stage that I was going to win. I had absolute full faith and full confidence in myself. And so I stepped on stage and I won my height class and I won the overall, and I stole the show. And that was a really beautiful experience for me, though unfortunately the diet that I was on leading up to the competition was actually quite imbalanced. We can go into that a little bit if you choose to, but I ended up in the hospital before my competition. I was in a state of like ketoacidosis. I had some really severe blood sugar issues. And so like when I made it to the stage, I was like barely making it to the stage. Like my body was extremely catabolic. I was very unwell. So as you can imagine, after the show, my body just, after going through so much physical trauma and all of that destruction, my body just did not know how to adapt to the change of going back to like a regular lifestyle. So I blew up and I started gaining all of this weight. And I realized that void that I had been trying to fill my entire life, making it to that stage, winning that bodybuilding competition, was actually revealing itself to me after the fact. And I started to look at myself and really feel this deep sense of self-loathing and self-hatred, because my body has defined my worth my entire life, or that's the way that I've perceived it. So I fell into a really deep, dark depression. And this was 3 years ago. So after this dark depression, I knew that something needed to change. So I left my job, I went on sick leave, and I really gave myself an opportunity to do some inner work and some healing. And I had to surrender again to a higher power that I was not fully connected to. I didn't really truly understand, but I had some really great mentors who were guiding me through this process. And then I experienced what I would refer to as a spiritual awakening. And this truly was the most life-changing moment of my life when I truly fully surrendered and just said, like, change, show me the way, please, I'm ready. And that really started to guide me down a path of connecting to myself, understanding the connection between my mind, my body, and my spirit, and starting to build a life that is based on holistic health. So I ended up from there meeting my current business partner. It was business love at first sight. We created a brand called Holistichicks. And so for the last couple of years, we've been working together, helping to empower our community to live their most authentic life and to really get to the root of their pain, to understand where it comes from, why it exists, and how to move through it, to honor it, to accept it, to let it go, so that you can fully start to step into your truest potential and your greatest power and shine your light the very brightest that you can. So that, in a nutshell, I know that was a little bit long, but that's been my story. And all of those pieces, I think, are so integral in really understanding why I am the way I am and why I'm here today. And it's all led me to this place of just feeling so deeply connected to my life's mission and so in love with myself and so in love with my life. It's the best.
And it shows, like, on the video, you're just radiating. You just radiate. It's like radiation.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Thank you.
Of course. Totally. I hope you're totally digging this episode. I love putting these together every week, and I hope you're getting something out of it. I love seeing where you're listening from. So next time you're listening, or even right now, take a picture of yourself watching the show or a screenshot of your favorite episode and tag me on Instagram at Healthful Pursuit. And if social isn't your thing, that's totally fine. Just jump on your favorite podcast player and leave a review for the show. Okay, back to the good stuff. And I think it's really interesting too. I don't think that a lot of people, myself included for a really long time, understand just what a trauma can do to your life and to the way you view yourself, everything about you. And it sounds like you had a couple of traumas. And I think a lot of people believe that a trauma has to be this huge thing, when in actuality, it doesn't have to be. What have you noticed when it comes to trauma and people?
So I've taken a dive really deep into just understanding trauma and how it impacts not only myself, but my clients, the community, everybody. And what trauma really is, it's something that impacts your nervous system and makes your body feel unsafe. So a trauma can be something as seemingly subtle as being chased by a dog, right? And that's what makes your nervous system turn on and pause and become like in this fearful state, right? So oftentimes I think that we get into this state of comparison or competition where like everybody's story has to be worse than somebody else's, right? And we're always comparing, well, her trauma is worse than mine, so my feelings aren't valid, my emotions aren't valid, right? And truthfully, we all experience trauma to some degree, right? We might even experience trauma like in our mother's womb that ends up being unhealed or unprocessed. So the work that I do, I really like to understand people's past and understand the things that have happened to them and what they could be carrying energetically in their body. So the root chakra is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the chakras. It's like,
yeah, I was raised by
good.
women who danced in the woods with drums naked.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I'm down with it.
So the root chakra often is where a lot of our traumas are stored, because that's our foundation, our sense of security and our sense of safety. So if anything has created an imbalance in that, then our root chakra is going to be out of balance and we're going to be living life feeling a little bit unsafe, right? So there are so many varying degrees of trauma. There's sexual trauma, there's physical abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's addiction, right? And there are so many different things that have happened to us in our past that are actually perpetuating cycles of experiences that are going to show up over and over again so long as we don't actually get to the root and address it. So understanding the depth of the pain that you're experiencing, where it's coming from, will allow you to really start to come to a place of acceptance of it and actually like heal that and let it go. Does that make sense?
Totally, it does. And when we don't heal it, we're not conscious of it and we don't let it go, what sorts of things can happen? Like what have you seen with your community? I know that I have a lot of experience not dealing with trauma and it can display in all sorts of things. Like addiction for me is a big one, eating disorder stuff. But what have you seen?
Yeah, the first word that came to mind, and it lies so deeply within our subconscious, right? So addiction is the word that comes to mind. And that's just something that I've experienced personally. And addiction is a real epidemic that everybody experiences to some degree, much like trauma, right? Like addiction is essentially a byproduct of unhealed trauma, because when you don't know what to do with the emotion that is taking place in your body, especially if you're living a little bit more unconsciously, right? Or have maybe less awareness of your emotions and your pain and why things are happening to you, all we know to do is to escape that. We want to run away from it. We want to get the out of there, right? And we want to reach for something that feels comforting and nurturing. So things like food and alcohol and drugs and shopping and sex and gambling, like all of these things fill that void and give us this sense of instant gratification and instant comfort. But then the shame cycle starts to come in. So then we know that these behaviors are abnormal. We know that they're not conducive to our well-being, and we start to feel ashamed and we start to feel embarrassed and we start to put ourselves down and hate ourselves for these behaviors. And so what that shame does is brings us back into that fearful state of feeling unsafe. And when we're back in that traumatic state, what do? We want to escape it. We want to reach for something. So I think that addiction and trauma are very correlated. And I think that in order to address your addictions, you need to address your trauma.
Yes, completely. Back to today's episode in a sec. Today's episode is sponsored by my friends over at Perfect Keto, who is an awesome company that I've been working with over the last 2 years. And I love their commitment to quality, their ability to know what us keto people need, because most of their staff are keto themselves. I use their products to stay into ketosis, burn more fat, extend my fast, and satisfy my sweet tooth. Now, if you're new to the ketogenic diet, Perfect Keto is a brand that you must know. All of their products help you get on the diet, make the transition easier, have you experiencing ketosis a little bit faster with boosted energy so that you really start to benefit from ketosis and you don't get discouraged by all of the symptoms that can pop up if you're not supplementing with electrolytes or not having enough fat or still having too many artificial sweeteners. And my favorite part to this, guys, is when you're new to keto, you can often have that afternoon slump. By supplementing with some of their products, specifically their exogenous ketones or their keto collagen, and even a little bit of their MCT oil powder, you can help avoid that afternoon slump that we can often experience as we are transitioning to the ketogenic diet. Now, my personal favorite Perfect Keto products include their keto bars. Almond butter brownie has my heart. It is the perfect dessert. Exogenous ketones help to maintain my energy level and give my brain a certain edge that I need every day. And lastly, their nut butter is out of this world amazing. Stick that stuff in the freezer, let it sit for 24 hours, and go to town. I use their stuff on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day. And if you go to perfectketo.com/KDP, you can get 20% off their products and up to 25% off, a total of $34 off when you grab my favorites as a bundle. Again, that's perfectketo.com/KDP. Okay, back to today's episode. Okay, there was a thought that I had when it comes to addiction is that for myself, I was addicted to not so awesome things, substance, all that stuff, and eating disorder things where I had anorexia, bulimia, and I couldn't. I see it as, it's not necessarily an addiction, but it became a very tight-knit relationship where I just couldn't live without an eating disorder, and I didn't know who I was, where I was, and it felt very similar to when I experienced addiction. And when we get to that spot, of course, almost everyone would agree, being addicted to substances or, experiencing an eating disorder, those are pretty bad things. But I think what's happening now is that a lot of people slap the word health on something, and then all of a sudden it's okay to do. And it's completely culturally accepted. You see that in just about everywhere. Even I went shopping a little while ago when there were lots of sales on, and the amount of products people were buying. And I was thinking, like, is this necessary? Do we need this? I mean, that can be a form of addiction. Also, I guess I just wanted to set the tone of addiction might not just be alcohol and gambling. It could be going to the gym multiple times a day, or going shopping for shoes that you don't need, or can you fill in the blanks on that too?
Yeah. So I think the question that you're asking is being addicted to some things good, or is that okay?
Yeah, that's exactly my question. Well done.
Yeah. I would say that, I would say no, addiction is addiction. And by definition, it is an abnormal behavior that brings us out of that fearful, traumatic state into a place of escape or comfort. So another word that I like to use is attachment. So I like to live the most detached life possible. So I like to think about the things in my life that I feel emotionally attached to. So if you think about like an energetic cord, something that you can't necessarily separate yourself from, whether that is going to the grocery store to buy donuts and chips and cake in the middle of the night to binge on, or if that is overeating a stalk of celery, whatever your intention is for that behavior, if it's coming from a place of attachment, then that is an addiction, and that is not healthy. And I've had a lot of experience with this as well, because when I started training for my bodybuilding competition, that was me. I was obsessed with the gym. I weighed every single ounce of the food that I ate, and that became a very addictive process for me. And when I look back, I really did. I lied to myself and told myself that this was healthy, that this was a really good thing. But again, it was just filling my void. It was just filling the void. So no, I think that addiction is addiction, and reliance on anything equals attachment, and that keeps us disconnected from ourselves. So we might jump from one thing to another, and there might be one that's like lesser of two evils. So for example, I went from drugs to then just being addicted to alcohol. And then I went from being addicted to alcohol to being addicted to food. And then I went from being addicted to food to being addicted to the gym. And then sometimes they were all intertwined, and it's just this like big shit show of attached cords that just make you feel like you have no idea who the you are, right? And then to mask that, to deal with that, you reach and you reach and you reach. So that reliance, it keeps us disconnected from who we are. And so it's important to address, like, am I eating this stalk of celery from a place of love, or am I doing it to bring me comfort, right? And that sounds like something that's so silly, but I've been addicted to healthy foods, and I've told myself that it was a good thing, but it never is. It never is. I will add though, if for anybody who's listening to this, I think it's so important to add to this that having an addiction requires so much self-compassion. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, oh my God, that's me. Like, I can't stop drinking, or I'm smoking cigarettes, or I'm smoking weed, or I'm trying to eat healthy, but I'm still turning to food like in an emotional way. Please just know that that is absolutely okay, because that is what in that very moment is going to bring you safety. Okay. So as long as you are not harming other people in the process, you're okay. And as much as this might feel like something that is so crippling and so debilitating and something permanent, it's not. Everything is impermanent. Everything is temporary. So trust yourself that you're going to be able to move through, identify why you feel the need to escape into this addiction, and what you need to do to be able to move through it. Does that make sense?
I'm so happy you added that, because I know that in my darkest moments, all I feel is more shame that I got into that in the first place, which just continues the endless loop
It
of
does. It perpetuates
everything.
the cycle.
Exactly.
It perpetuates the cycle. And nothing will ever be healed or cleansed or let go of if we don't do it from a place of self-love. Right. Like I think that often, and this is something that I wanted to speak to as well, in the diet industry, that in itself can become like just engaging ourselves in this culture through and through without actually identifying like why we want to do that, what our intention is for eating healthy. Is it to make ourselves feel strong and empowered, or is it to try to fit the mold of what society expects of us? Is it to lose weight? And I think that weight loss is a great thing. It's a beautiful thing. And I don't think that it necessarily needs to be deemed negative to want to lose weight. But there are so many cases where people are addicted to, so attached to this outcome of like, okay, when I lose the weight, then I'm going to be happy. When I finally stick to this diet, then I'm going to be happy. And that is such a challenging belief system to navigate. And it feels gross even just talking about it, because that's what we've been conditioned to do, is to just keep on reaching for this destination that's never going to come, right? So to be like present in your body, start to actually check in with yourself and ask yourself like, okay, how am I feeling right now? How am I feeling when I try to conquer this diet? Is it working? Like, am I actually able to, I think it was Melissa Hartwig, maybe founder of Whole30, that said something, asked the question, and how is that working for you? Right? So it's like we're trying to dive into this diet time and time again. And the question, just ask yourself, how is that working for me? And if it's not working, then maybe we need to kind of like pivot, shift our focus a little bit, and start to develop a new intention for why we want to do that. That's a little bit of a side note, but I think it does still tie in for sure.
Oh, it definitely does. It definitely does. And she's a smart lady, that Melissa. So she has a couple good quotes. Like, yep. Okay. So I think a lot of people in this situation, and I've definitely been at a crossroads many, many times, thinking like the clouds are going to part, the angels are going to sing, and all of a sudden I'll have this life-altering experience and moment where it all just makes sense. Or that I will finally, when I smoked cigarettes for a really, 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 really long time, since I was about 12 to when I met Kevin, and he gave me an ultimatum and said, if you don't quit smoking, you can't meet my mother. It worked really well. But I always thought there was just going to be a moment when I smoked cigarettes that would just like change things, and then I would stop quitting. And I just waited for that moment to come. And thankfully, the whole Kevin thing definitely helped. But I waited for a moment that I thought that I deep down knew would never come. And I think so many of us stay in these patterns thinking, well, when it gets really, really bad, I'll just stop. Or when my kid reaches 15, I'll change my ways. If we don't have that life-altering experience, like what you experienced with your trauma, with your dad and all that thing of like, it sounded like a light bulb went off of like, wait a minute. And that kind of was the catalyst that made things worse, but ultimately made things better. Should we wait for that moment, or when is that moment, or how do we move forward? When is the time to move forward, I guess, is my question.
Yeah, that's such a good question. You know what? If we wait for that moment, the universe is going to drop it eventually. And it might be in a more aggressive way than we could have moved through it on our own, right? So that's where the self-awareness piece really comes in. And I think that we can justify things through and through, right? As to when we're going to stop or why we haven't stopped yet. And what it comes down to is just your own level of personal tolerance. What do you want to tolerate in your life, and what will you no longer tolerate? And for me, very recently, there came a time where I was still so attached to food, even living a conscious life, even being connected to my authentic self, even coaching others on body image and their relationship with food. I was still hiding the fact that I was emotionally eating. And that was something that weighed so heavy on me. And I really did not know how to let go. And there was a day where I just said to myself, I will no longer tolerate this. I will not tolerate it, because I love myself so much I love myself so much that I am not going to allow this to weigh heavy on me or to be a burden for me to move forward into the direction that I desire and that I really think that I'm worthy of. So I think just asking yourself, like, what am I ready to kick and what will I no longer tolerate? And I think the affirmation that worked a lot for me was, I owe it to myself. I owe it to myself to see what's on the other side. So anybody who's listening, there's probably something that's resonating with you, whether it's, related to food or booze or sex or whatever. Just say to yourself right now, I owe it to myself to see what is on the other side and see how that feels in your body, and start to integrate that into your body. And if you say that over and over and over again, your level of tolerance will change, and it's just inevitable. And if it doesn't, that's okay, because the universe does give us these smackdowns where we're like, holy shit, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? And in those moments, I've now learned to embrace it, to settle into it, to kind of get cozy with that shadow or with that darkness, and to just let it happen and allow myself to process through the emotion and the pain and let it move through my body, because those are the moments where you transform. Those are the moments where you transform. So remembering that we always have a choice. We always, always, always can choose what we want internally. There are things that will happen externally, influences that are so far beyond our control. And we never know the outcome of what's going to happen, but what we know is how to navigate what is taking place internally. So making those choices every single day will lead you exactly where you're meant to go. And having a sense of faith and trust within yourself, I think will allow you to reach this place of surrender rather than control. So going back to the ego, our logical, rational brain, it thrives on control. And that comes back to needing that sense of safety, right? So when we say, F it, I'm going to let go of that control and just trust a power outside of myself, or trust my intuition, or trust my body, or trust whatever is going on that I'm not in control of, we're guided wherever we're meant to go. And oftentimes that does lead to a breakdown, but breakdowns always lead to breakthroughs. And I know that to be true. So now when one happens, or when I'm experiencing this really deep shift where my nervous system is alert, right? I just learn to kind of feel into it and settle into it and let it happen, because I have this deep sense of foundational trust that it's going to lead me to something better. So these things are not happening to you, they're happening for you. So rather than perceiving yourself as a victim, because that's where the energy of guilt comes from. It's not living up to other people's expectations. That's why we feel guilty for things. And then we carry this role of victimization. We're like, oh, poor me. These are my circumstances, right? But when you can actually feel empowered to make your own choices rather than staying in that state of victimization, that's when you make the changes, right? Does that make sense?
Oh, completely. Yes. Something recently happened. I guess we're recording this so ahead of when it's going to go live. But back in October of last year, my husband and I, 2 months prior to, decided to make a major shift in our life and move into a sailboat. And I thought it was going to be hey, we lived in an RV. How hard can it be to live in a sailboat? It's basically the same thing. It is not the same thing. At all the same thing. It is like living on Mars when you've lived on Earth your whole life, I'm sure.
Wow.
And I wasn't expecting to be so overwhelmed and so hit with so much stuff that I wasn't prepared for. And I completely had a breakdown, shaking, crying. I couldn't talk for an entire day. I couldn't deal with it. And instead of fighting that, instead of saying I'm okay, it's fine, it'll be okay, I just let it happen. And it was one of the first times where I just totally broke down and allowed myself to completely break down and feel it and talk what I could to Kevin. And amazingly, he felt the same way. And he was just trying to show that he was strong and everything was fine when it wasn't fine for him too. And once I cried and said, I just want to go home. I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to go home. I hate this. It's too expensive. It's too hard. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel totally clueless. And Kevin was like, me too. It was such a powerful experience for the two of us to just be not sad, but just to mourn our previous life and be sad at just everything that had happened and just feel all those feelings, the next day it was like so freeing and amazing to have felt that. And all those feelings just went away. And it was like, we just needed to feel them together, and then it was fine. And we just moved forward. It was really interesting. It's the first time it had happened where I just let it all like, I guess that's what you're saying, is just like, just let it happen and feel all those things. Is that right?
That's totally right. Yeah. And I'm so glad that you were able to like drop into your emotion and just allow yourself to feel it, because that brings us back to that vulnerability piece that we spoke to at the beginning, right? Like if we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable with ourselves, then we're never going to be able to be vulnerable with the rest of the world, right? And so to honor those moments of like total surrender and total breakdown, rather than like putting on this mask where you're like, it's fine, everything's perfect. That energy is going to be suppressed until you actually move through it, right? Because your body would have seen or felt that experience as a trauma, right? So if you didn't actually let that emotion flow through you, emotion is energy in motion, right? Then that would have stayed trapped in your body, and it maybe would have surfaced in a year or 2 years or 10 years, who knows, right? But our bodies are energy. Energy is everything. It is within us. It is around us. So it's always in movement. So if you trap it, if you bury it or suppress it, like that shit's not going anywhere. That is going to stay within you. And that's going to lead to you living inauthentically or living out of your power, continuing to feel powerless over circumstances out of your control, right? So like, what did that experience teach you moving forward into new experiences? Like, I'm sure that brought so much wisdom and insight into your life, so that the next time something huge happens, like an adaptation to change or something that you don't expect, you know now that your body is safe, that you are safe to just kind of like ride the wave.
Completely.
Right? Literally ride the friggin' wave.
Literally.
That's awesome.
Brooklyn, where can people find more from you?
So I'm going through a transition right now, really, really huge transition in my professional life. So I will be at some point rebuilding a new website, probably by June. That's going to be live. Or whenever this is launched. But for now, you can head over to my Instagram, brooklyn.vienneau. You can also find me on Facebook, Brooklyn Vienneau. If you want to take a look at my current website, that's www.holisticchicks.com. That's me and my current business partner, and we're going to be going through some transitions. So go to my Instagram, brooklyn.vienneau. I'm in this space right now where I'm like totally trying to reinvent myself, and I want to get my message out and my voice out. So please, if anything that I said today inspired you or resonated with your soul, please go follow me. I really like to deliver the most authentic, vulnerable content possible and communicate in a way that resonates with people. So I hope that you go follow me.
And you do that so beautifully, like I said at the beginning. So yeah, we'll include links to your Instagram in our show notes and everything, so people can click there. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Leanne. I hope to connect with you again sometime in the future. I feel like I've already known you for years, because I actually have been following. Like, I found you on YouTube and was like, oh my God, fangirl. So I this is like a dream. I can't even believe that this is happening.
It's so crazy. That's why I love my job, because I just get to connect with such beautiful people, and they can share their story with other people that don't even know they need it yet. Mm-hmm. And then I get to connect with, it's such a gift. So thank you so much for coming on.
You are a gift to the world, Leanne. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks for listening to the Keto Diet Podcast. Join us again in a couple of days to discover more keto for women secrets for your fat-fueled life. The Keto Diet Podcast, including show notes and links, provides information in respect to healthy living, recipes, nutrition, and diet, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Keto Diet Podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without any representations or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified physician for medical advice, and always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.